The great station floated in the darkness between stars. Its crystal walls caught the light from distant suns and threw it back in rainbow colors. Inside, beings from 12 different worlds sat around a massive table. They had come here because something was wrong, something that made them all afraid. Ambassador Tae-ho Kim sat quietly in his chair. He was human, and humans were still new to this council. Only 50 years ago, his people had been alone on their small blue planet. Now they sat with creatures that could fly through space with their minds, and others that looked like giant insects. Tae-ho watched the other beings talk in their strange languages. Their voices filled the air like music, but the tune was worried and dark. Next to him sat Council Prime Minister Woo Jin Park. The old man had gray hair and kind eyes, but today, those eyes looked tired. He had been working with aliens for 20 years now. He knew their ways better than most humans. On Tae-ho's other side sat Dr. So-young Lee. She studied how different species lived and thought. Her job was to help humans understand their new, alien friends. The leader of the meeting was a tall blue creature with 4 arms. Its name was impossible for human mouths to say, so everyone called it Speaker 1. It stood up and the room became quiet. Friends of the council, Speaker 1, said in perfect Earth English, "We have a problem, a big problem." The creature pressed a button and the air above the table filled with light. Pictures appeared showing star maps and reports. Red marks covered many areas. "Look at these reports," Speaker 1 continued. "Pirates have been disappearing. Not just 1 or 2 ships, whole fleets. They send no messages for help, they just vanish." A creature that looked like a giant bird spoke next. "The Crimson Raiders had 300 ships last month. Now we cannot find even one." "The Star Wolves too," added another voice. This came from a being made of what looked like living crystal. 500 pirates, gone in 2 weeks. Tae-ho felt the eyes of many creatures turn toward him and his human friends. The feeling was not comfortable. Speaker 1's 4 arms moved in the air as more pictures appeared. But this is not the worst news. The hegemony has pulled back from 3 whole star systems. The room became very quiet. The hegemony was the most feared group in this part of space. They had been attacking and enslaving people for over 200 years. They took children from their families and sold them like animals. They destroyed planets just to show their power. If the hegemony was running away, something terrible was happening. "The patterns are clear," Speaker 1 said. The pictures in the air changed to show a timeline. First, humans build what they call research stations in these areas. Then pirates disappear. Then slave traders go quiet. Finally, the hegemony runs away. Dr. So-young Lee leaned forward. "Speaker 1, are you saying humans are responsible for these disappearances?" "We are not saying anything yet," replied the blue creature. "But the facts are strange. Wherever humans go, criminals vanish. Yet we see no signs of war. No destroyed ships. No bodies floating in space. They just disappear." An insect-like being with green skin spoke up. "Perhaps humans have weapons we do not know about. Weapons that leave no trace. Or maybe they make deals with these criminals," suggested another voice. "Humans are known for their unusual methods." Prime Minister Park stood up slowly. His old bones made small sounds as he moved. "Friends," he said in a calm voice, "humans have indeed built research stations in the outer areas of space. We study alien cultures. We try to understand how different beings live. This is not a crime." "But what happens to the pirates?" asked the crystal being. "Where do they go?" "We do not know," Park answered. "We are as puzzled as you are." This was not entirely true, and Tae-ho knew it. He had read reports that made him uncomfortable, stories of pirates and slavers who had given up their old ways, tales of hegemony soldiers who now worked as farmers on human stations. But these reports seemed impossible. How could someone change a killer into a gardener? Speaker 1's eyes looked directly at the human delegation. Those alien eyes seemed to see right through them. "The Council has decided to investigate these disappearances. We will send teams to observe human activities in the outer regions." "Of course," said Prime Minister Park. Humans welcome investigation, we have nothing to hide. But Tejo noticed that Park's hands shook just a little as he spoke. The old man was nervous about something. The meeting continued for 3 more hours. Species after species reported the same story. Criminal groups would appear near human stations, then vanish completely. Trade routes that had been dangerous for centuries were now safe. Areas of space that used to be filled with screams and violence were now quiet and peaceful. The aliens found this peace more frightening than the violence had been. As the meeting ended, creatures began to leave in small groups. They whispered to each other in their own languages. Tejo heard words that his translation device turned into suspicious and dangerous and threat. Dr. Lee gathered her papers with quick, nervous movements. "They're scared of us," she whispered to Tejo. "Maybe they should be," he whispered back, thinking of those impossible reports. The 3 humans walked back to their ship in silence. The station's hallways were filled with aliens who watched them pass. Some looked curious. Others looked worried. A few looked angry. Once they were alone on their ship, Prime Minister Park sat down heavily in his chair. He looked every one of his 70 years. "Sir," Tejo said carefully, "what aren't we telling them?" Park was quiet for a long time. He stared out the window at the stars. Finally, he spoke. "The truth is more frightening than anything they can imagine," the old man said. "But not for the reasons they think." Dr. Lee looked confused. "What do you mean?" Park turned to look at both of them. His kind eyes now held a deep sadness. "What we've learned to do to our enemies," he said slowly, "is worse than killing them. We've learned to make them into friends." Outside the ship, aliens prepared for war against an enemy they did not understand. They planned for battles and weapons and death. They had no idea that humans had already won a war that no one else even knew was being fought. A war where the greatest victory was turning your enemy into someone who would die to protect you. The investigation would begin soon. When it did, the galaxy would learn something that would change everything forever. They would learn that some weapons were more powerful than any gun or bomb. Some victories were more complete than any conquest. They would learn what humans had, discovered long ago on their small blue planet. That understanding someone completely was the most dangerous weapon of all. 3 weeks had passed since the council meeting. Now a small fleet of ships moved through deep space toward the outer rim. The investigation team included some of the smartest beings in the galaxy. They came from the most advanced species with technology that could see through walls and read minds. The team leader was Commander Vexthal, one of the insect-like Vrex. His people had built machines that could think faster than any brain. Next to him stood Mindweaver Shalnara from the Mentari race. Her people could read thoughts and emotions from across a star system. If humans were using some kind of mind control, she would find it. Their target was Research Station Delta 7. According to official records, it was a small human outpost that studied alien plant life. Only 30 humans worked there. It should have been quiet and boring. But this station sat right in the middle of what used to be Crimson Raider territory. 3 months ago, over 100 pirate ships had controlled this area. Now there were none. Commander Vexthal's compound eyes studied the scanner readings as they approached the station. "Interesting," he clicked in his mechanical voice. "I detect 47 human life signs, but also 238 other beings." "What species?" asked Mindweaver Shalnara. "Mixed, very mixed. I see hegemony DNA patterns, Raider genetic markers, even some skullcrusher signatures." This made no sense. The species Vexthal had named were all violent criminals. Skullcrushers were so dangerous that most planets shot them on sight. What were they doing on a human research station? The team's ship docked with the station without any problems. No weapons were pointed at them. No security checks were demanded. A simple greeting message appeared on their screen. "Welcome to Delta 7. Commander Choi is waiting for you in the main hall." The airlock opened and the investigation team stepped into the station. What they saw made them stop and stare. The hallways were bright and clean. Plants from dozens of worlds grew in containers along the walls. The air smelled fresh and carried the sound of laughter. Children were playing somewhere nearby. But these were not human children. The voices belonged to young hegemony warriors, and Raider Cubs. Commander Jinwoo Choi met them at the entrance to the main hall. He was a tall man with graying hair and a warm smile. Behind him stood other humans, but also beings that should have been in prison cells or fighting pits. "Welcome to our station," Choi said in perfect Vrex clicking sounds. Then he switched to Mentari thought-speak for Shalnara's benefit. "We are honored by your visit." "You speak our language as well," noted Vexthal. "We believe understanding begins with communication," Choi replied. "Please let me show you around." What the team saw on their tour made their investigation equipment work overtime. In the hydroponics bay, former skull crusher warriors tended to delicate flowers. Their massive claws, built for tearing apart starship hulls, now carefully adjusted plant nutrients. They worked alongside Dr. Heejin Nam, a small human woman who showed them which plants needed more water. "How long have they been here?" asked Shalnara, using her mind powers to scan the skull crushers. She expected to find fear, anger, or signs of mental control. Instead, she found something impossible: contentment. "Boram has been with us for 2 months," Dr. Nam answered, pointing to the largest skull crusher. "He came here after his raidership was damaged in an asteroid field. We helped repair it and he decided to stay." Shalnara's mental probe went deeper. The skull crusher's mind was completely normal. No drugs, no hypnosis, no artificial changes. He simply wanted to be here. In the education center, the team found something even more strange. Young hegemony warriors sat in a classroom with human children. They were learning about different cultures and how to grow food. The teacher was a former Crimson Raider captain named Zektar. His ship had once destroyed 3 civilian transports in a single day. Now he taught math to 10-year-olds. Lieutenant Boram Song, a young human communications officer, noticed the investigators' confusion. "It's normal to be surprised at first," she said kindly. "Most visitors are. But you'll see that everyone here chose to stay. No one is forced to do anything." "Chose," clicked Vexthal. "These beings are natural killers. They choose violence the way fish choose water." "That's what we used to think too," Song replied. "But people can change when they understand why they made bad choices in the first place." The investigation team spent the rest of the day taking secret recordings and scanning everything they could. Their equipment found no signs of mind control devices, no drugs in the air or water, no hidden weapons or prison cells. The former criminals moved freely around the station. They could leave any time they wanted, but they didn't want to leave. That evening, the team was invited to dinner in the main cafeteria. Long tables held beings from a dozen different worlds, all eating and talking together. Former enemies shared stories and laughed at each other's jokes. A hegemony enforcer helped a human child reach something on a high shelf. A skull crusher showed pictures of flowers he had grown to anyone who would look. Vexthal's scanner detected something during dinner that made his insect blood run cold. The stress chemicals in the former criminals' bodies were at normal levels. They were not afraid. They were not being threatened. They were genuinely happy. After dinner, Commander Choi sat with the investigation team in his office. "I know why you're here," he said calmly. "The council wants to know what happened to all the pirates and slavers." "And what did happen to them?" asked Shalnara. Choi smiled. "We talked to them." "Talked?" Vexthal's mechanical voice rose in pitch. "That's all?" "Talking is more powerful than most people realize," said Dr. Nam, joining the conversation. "When you really listen to someone, when you understand their pain and fear, amazing things can happen." She pulled out a data pad and showed them files. Each one contained detailed information about a former criminal, their childhood, their families, the events that had turned them violent. The files were incredibly complete, like psychological profiles written by experts. "Take Boram," Dr. Nam continued, pointing to information about the skull crusher they had met earlier. "His family was killed by raiders when he was young. He joined the crushers because he thought strength was the only way to survive. Once, he understood that safety could come from cooperation instead of fear. He didn't want to fight anymore." "You study your enemies," Shalnara said slowly, understanding beginning to dawn in her mind. We study everyone, Choi corrected. Friends, enemies, ourselves. Understanding is the first step toward peace. The investigation team returned to their ship that night with recordings and data that would shock the galaxy. But they also carried a growing fear. If humans could turn the most violent criminals into peaceful farmers just by talking to them, what else could they do? What could they do to entire governments? To whole species? To the council itself? Vexthal filed his preliminary report as their ship left Delta 7. His mechanical fingers typed words that felt strange and frightening. Humans have developed what may be the most dangerous weapon in galactic history. They can make anyone believe that cooperation is better than conflict. Behind them, Research Station Delta 7 continued its quiet work. Former pirates taught alien children about the stars. Ex-slavers learned to grow food for hundreds of people, and humans took notes, always taking notes, learning how to understand the next group of enemies who would arrive seeking violence, but leave seeking peace. The investigation was just beginning, but already the team knew they had found something that would change everything. The only question was whether the galaxy was ready for that change, or whether it would choose to fight against it, not knowing that fighting humans only gave them more chances to understand you completely. The investigation team's ship moved through space like a hunting beast. They had visited 7 human stations now, and each one had been the same impossible story. Pirates becoming farmers, slavers becoming teachers, the most violent beings in the galaxy learning to grow flowers and sing lullabies to alien children. Commander Vexthal had not slept properly in weeks. His compound eyes kept reviewing the same data over and over. The numbers made no sense. According to their records, over 3,000 known criminals had simply vanished from active crime in the past year. Not killed, not imprisoned. They had become something else entirely. Mindweaver Shalnara floated in her meditation chamber, her mental powers stretched to their limits. She had scanned hundreds of former criminals now. Each time she found the same thing. Minds that had been changed completely, but with no sign of force or trickery. It was as if these beings had simply decided to become different people. Their current target was Station Gamma 12, located in what used to be the heart of hegemony space. This area had been so dangerous that even military ships traveled in large groups. Now it was quiet, peaceful. The hegemony forces that had controlled 12 planets from this location had simply left. The station was larger than the others they had visited. As their ship approached, they could see gardens built on the outside hull. Transparent domes covered growing areas where beings worked together under artificial suns. It looked more like a small city than a research outpost. Captain Donghyun Yu met them at the docking bay. He was younger than Commander Choi, maybe 40 years old, with kind eyes and calloused hands. Behind him stood the usual mixture of humans and former criminals. But this time the investigation team recognized some faces. General Kavnash, whispered Shalnara in shock. The being she pointed to had once commanded the hegemony's 4th battle fleet. His forces had enslaved entire worlds. Children across the galaxy had nightmares about his red armor and burning ships. Now he wore simple work clothes and carried a basket of vegetables. "Ah, you know Kavanash," said Captain Yu cheerfully. "He's our head of agricultural planning now. Brilliant mind for logistics. He can organize crop rotations for 10,000 people without breaking a sweat." General Kavanash approached the investigation team. His forearms moved in what used to be a battle salute but now seemed more like a friendly wave. "Investigators," he said in a voice that had once ordered the destruction of star systems. "Welcome to our home. Would you like to see the new grain processing facility? I designed it myself." Vexthal's scanners almost overloaded trying to understand what they were detecting. This was definitely General Kavanash. Same DNA, same brain patterns, same memories. But the stress chemicals that should have filled a warrior's body were completely absent. Instead, they found markers associated with pride in useful work and satisfaction with peaceful achievement. The tour of Station Gamma 12 was like walking through a fever dream. In the engineering section, former hegemony weapon specialists worked on water purification systems, The medical bay was run by Dr. Sal Nash, who had once been the hegemony's chief torturer. Now she specialized in child psychology and helped young aliens overcome trauma. But the most shocking discovery came in the station's archives. Researcher Yoon Young Shin met them in a vast library filled with files and recordings. She was a small, human woman with gray hair and the brightest eyes Vexthal had ever seen on any species. "This is our Integration Research Center," she explained as she led them through rows of data storage units. "We study every being who comes to our stations. We want to understand what makes them choose violence and what might help them choose peace instead." She showed them files that made the investigation team's blood run cold, detailed psychological profiles of thousands of beings, family histories going back generations, analysis of childhood trauma, social pressure, economic desperation, and cultural programming. The humans had mapped the causes of violence like doctors mapping a disease. "Here," Dr. Shin said, pulling up a holographic display. "This shows the progression of integration for a typical skull-crusher warrior." The display showed a timeline. Week 1, arrival at the station, usually damaged or injured. Week 2, basic medical care and introduction to station life. Week 3, first conversations about the warrior's background and motivations. Weeks 4 through 8, structured activities designed to give the warrior a sense of purpose and belonging. By week 12, Dr. Shin continued, 97% of subjects have chosen to remain on the station permanently. They begin training in useful skills and often become our most effective integration specialists for new arrivals. "Integration specialists?" asked Shalnara. "Former criminals who help other former criminals," explained Dr. Shin. "They understand the mindset better than we do. They can speak to the pain and fear that drives violence. They're very effective." The investigation team spent 3 days at Station Gamma 12. They recorded everything, scanned everyone, and tried to find some crack in the impossible story, but there was no crack. The humans had somehow developed a perfect system for transforming violent beings into peaceful ones. On their final day, they witnessed something that would haunt their dreams forever. A hegemony raiding ship had been detected, approaching the station. It was damaged and leaking atmosphere. The 3 survivors aboard were some of the most vicious killers in known space. They had probably come to attack the station or demand tribute. The investigation team watched as Captain Yu handled the situation. He brought the damaged ship into the docking bay and had the survivors taken to the medical center. No weapons were drawn. No threats were made. The raiders were treated like guests who had arrived for dinner. Monitor Junho Beck, a quiet human who served as liaison to visiting ships, explained the process to the investigators. "The raiders are scared and angry right now," he said calmly. "They expect to be killed or imprisoned. Instead, we'll make sure they're comfortable and safe. Once they realize they're not in danger, we can begin talking to them." "Talking about what?" asked Vexthal. "About why they chose to become raiders. About what they really want from life. About whether violence has actually given them the things they were looking for." Within hours, the investigators could see the change beginning. The raiders stopped demanding to contact their fleet. They stopped threatening the medical staff. They started asking questions about the station and the beings who lived there. By the end of the week, 2 of the 3 raiders had asked to stay. That night, the investigation team held an emergency meeting on their ship. Their reports back to the council had become increasingly desperate. "They're not using weapons," Vexthal typed in his encrypted message. "They're not using mind control. They're not using drugs or surgery or any technology we can identify. They simply understand their enemies so completely that they can predict and redirect their behavior." "Recommend immediate council session," added Shalnara. "Humans have developed something more dangerous than any weapon we've ever encountered. They can end conflicts by eliminating the desire for conflict itself." As their ship left Station Gamma 12, the investigation team looked back at the peaceful lights of the human outpost. Gardens grew on its hull. Former enemies worked together in its corridors. Children who should have been soldiers played games in its parks. It was the most beautiful and terrifying thing any of them had ever seen, because they finally understood what humans were really doing. They weren't just stopping crime or ending raids. They were systematically eliminating the concept of enemy from the galaxy. They were making it impossible for beings to choose violence because they removed the reasons why violence had seemed necessary. And if they could do that to pirates and slavers and the mighty hegemony itself, they could do it to anyone. They could do it to the Galactic Council. The investigation was nearly complete, but its results would tear the galaxy apart. Because some truths were too dangerous to know, and some weapons were too powerful to exist. The only question now was whether the Council would try to stop humanity before it was too late, not realizing that trying to fight humans was exactly what would give them the chance to understand and transform their opponents completely. The Council chamber had never been so quiet. 12 species sat around the crystal table, but no one spoke. The investigation team's final report glowed in the air above them, filled with impossible facts and terrifying conclusions. The silence stretched on until it became painful. Speaker 1's 4 blue arms trembled as it reviewed the data one more time. 3 months of investigation, 15 human stations visited, over 5,000 former criminals documented, all of them transformed from killers into gardeners, teachers, and peaceful workers. Not one had been forced. Not one had been brainwashed. They had simply changed. "This cannot be real," whispered the crystal being known as Shard Singer. Its body rang like broken glass when it spoke. No species could develop such power. But the evidence was overwhelming. Videos of hegemony generals teaching children to read. Audio recordings of skull-crusher warriors singing lullabies to alien babies. Brain scans showing complete personality transformations with no sign of artificial interference. Council Speaker Miran Jang stood up from her seat. She was human, but had served on the council for 15 years. Most members respected her wisdom and calm judgment. Today her face looked tired and sad. "Fellow council members," she said in a voice that carried to every corner of the chamber, "you have questions about my people. I will answer them." Speaker 1 pointed a trembling arm at the floating report. "Explain this. Explain how humans can transform the most violent beings in the galaxy into peaceful farmers." Miran Jang was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her words fell into the silence like stones into deep water. "We learned it from ourselves." "What does that mean?" demanded the insect representative, Commander Vexthal. "Human history is filled with violence," Yang replied. "We fought wars for thousands of years. We enslaved each other. We committed every crime that you see among the stars today. But we also learned how to stop." She gestured, and new images appeared in the air. Pictures from Earth's history, battlefields covered with bodies, cities burning, children crying over their dead parents. "We discovered that violence always comes from the same sources," Jiang continued. "Fear, pain, desperation. The belief that hurting others is the only way to protect yourself or get what you need. All species experience these things," noted Mindweaver Shalnara. "Why could only humans learn to overcome them?" "Because we had no choice," answered a new voice. Everyone turned to see Director Hyun-Soo Kang entering the chamber. He was an older, human man with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. Behind him walked General Young-Ho Ryu, who wore simple civilian clothes instead of any military uniform. "Director Kang," said Speaker 1, "you were not invited to this session." "No," Kang agreed. "But after reading your investigation reports, I thought it was time for complete honesty." He moved to stand beside Speaker Jiang. His presence seemed to change the atmosphere in the room. The other council members leaned forward, sensing that something important was about to happen. "You want to know our secret," Kang said. "The truth is simple and terrible. We learned to transform our enemies because we nearly destroyed ourselves with violence." New images appeared above the table. These showed Earth during its darkest periods. World wars that killed millions. Weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. A planet pushed to the edge of complete destruction by its own children. "We developed weapons that could end all life on our world," General Ryu explained. "We built machines that could think faster than humans and control every aspect of society. We created diseases that could kill every living thing on our planet. But you survived, observed the bird-like representative. Barely, said Director Kang. And only because we learned the most important lesson in the galaxy. Violence cannot be defeated by greater violence. Fear cannot be conquered by creating more fear. The only way to end conflict is to remove the reasons why conflict begins. Speaker Zhang added her voice to the explanation. We studied every war, every crime, every act of violence in our history. We mapped the patterns. We learned to identify the moment when someone chooses to hurt others instead of finding peaceful solutions. And then? Asked Shardsinger. Then we learned to offer better choices, said Kang simply. The crystal being's voice rang with disbelief. You make it sound easy. It's not easy, General Ryu said firmly. It's the hardest thing any species can do. It requires understanding your enemies so completely that you know them better than they know themselves. It means caring about their pain even when they're trying to kill you. It means believing that anyone can change, even when all evidence suggests otherwise. Commander Vexthal's mechanical voice cut through the air. You study your enemies to manipulate them. No, said Director Kang. We study them to heal them. Heal them? Several voices spoke at once. Kang gestured and the images above the table changed again. Now they showed the human stations the investigation team had visited. But these pictures were different. They showed the detailed medical and psychological files that humans kept on every former criminal. Violence is a sickness, Kang explained. It spreads from parent to child, from world to world, from generation to generation. But like any sickness, it can be cured if you understand what causes it. Take General Cavendish, added General Ryu, the hegemony warrior who now grows vegetables on Station Gamma 12. His violent behavior began when his family was killed by raiders. He joined the hegemony because he thought strength was the only protection against pain. Once we helped him, understand that cooperation provides better protection than violence, continued Speaker Zhang. He chose a different path, not because we forced him, but because we gave him a choice he'd never seen before. The council chamber fell silent again. But this silence was different. It was the quiet of beings who had just learned something that changed everything they thought they knew about the universe. Finally, Speaker 1 found its voice. You have applied this healing to thousands of criminals. What is your ultimate goal? Director Kang looked directly into the alien's large eyes. To end violence in the galaxy. Completely. Impossible, breathed Shardsinger. Is it? Asked Speaker Yang. We ended it on Earth. We've ended it on every station where we work. We've transformed the most violent organizations in this region of space. Why should we stop there? Because, said Commander Vexthal slowly, some of us don't want to be healed. The humans exchanged glances. A sad understanding passed between them. We know, said General Ryu quietly. Some beings choose violence even when offered better alternatives. Some species build their entire culture around conflict and conquest. Some governments use fear and aggression to maintain power. What do you do about them? Asked Mindweaver Shalnara. We keep trying, answered Director Kang. We study them. We understand them. We wait for the moment when they're ready to choose something different. And if that moment never comes, then we protect ourselves and others from their violence, said Speaker Zhang. But we never stop believing that change is possible. The meeting continued for 6 more hours. The humans answered every question with patient honesty. They showed brain scans proving their methods caused no permanent damage. They provided evidence that former criminals retained free will and could leave human stations anytime they chose. They demonstrated that their integration techniques worked on every known species. But they also revealed something that terrified the Council more than any weapon could have. We've been doing this to ourselves for 50 years, Director Kang said as the session ended. Every human child learns these techniques in school. Every human adult practices them in daily life. We've eliminated violent crime on Earth not through punishment but through prevention. You've transformed your entire species, whispered Speaker 1. Yes, agreed Speaker Zhang. And now we're sharing what we learned with anyone who wants to learn it. As the humans left the chamber, the remaining council members sat in stunned silence. They had called this investigation to learn about missing pirates and vanishing criminals. Instead, they had discovered something far more significant. Humanity had developed the power to end conflict itself. They could take any violent being and transform them into a peaceful contributor to society. They had already used this power on thousands of criminals and were now offering to share it with other species. The question was no longer what humans were doing to their enemies. The question was what the galaxy would do now that it knew humanity's most dangerous secret: that peace was possible, violence was optional, and any being could choose to change if someone cared enough to show them how. 6 months had passed since the Council learned humanity's terrible secret. The galaxy was no longer the same place. 3 groups had formed among the civilized worlds, and they watched each other with growing suspicion and fear. The first group called themselves the Integration Alliance. 12 species had decided to learn humanity's methods for ending violence. Their worlds had become peaceful almost overnight as they applied human techniques to their own criminals and conflicts. Crime rates dropped to nearly zero. Wars between planets simply stopped. The second group was the Resistance Coalition. They viewed humanity's methods as a form of cultural genocide. These species believed that aggression and conflict were natural parts of life that should not be eliminated. They had withdrawn to the outer rim of the galaxy, declaring their space off limits to human influence. The third group remained undecided, watching and waiting to see which path would prove stronger. President Seung-min Oh stood at the window of his office on Earth, looking up at the stars. He was the leader of humanity's galactic initiatives, and the weight of his people's discovery pressed down on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. In his hands, he held reports from both Alliance worlds and Resistance territories. The Alliance worlds told stories of transformation. Former warlords had become teachers. Violent species had learned to resolve conflicts through understanding, rather than force. Children who would have grown up as soldiers now spent their days learning science and art. But the Resistance worlds told different stories. They spoke of humans as a plague that destroyed the natural order. They called integration techniques a form of mind control that turned proud warriors into weak farmers. Some Resistance leaders had declared holy wars against human influence. Soft chime indicated that someone wanted to enter his office. "Come in," President Oh called. Ambassador Ja-young Kim walked through the door, followed by Dr. Chang-ho Park. Kim handled diplomatic relations with both Alliance and Resistance worlds. Dr. Park led the team that had developed humanity's integration protocols. "Mr. President," said Ambassador Kim, "we have a situation developing in the Kepler sector." President Oh turned from the window. "The Resistance Coalition?" "Yes, sir. They've formed a military alliance called the Purity Fleet. 50 warships, from 6 different species. They're demanding that we abandon all integration activities and withdraw from the outer rim." Dr. Park placed a datapad on the president's desk. "Intelligence suggests they're planning to attack Station Delta 7 as a symbol of resistance against our methods." President Oh studied the information. The Purity Fleet included some of the most aggressive species in the galaxy. They had weapons that could destroy planets and soldiers trained from birth for warfare. Against them, the humans had research stations filled with former criminals and peaceful researchers. "What are our options?" the president asked. "We could evacuate the stations," suggested Ambassador Kim. "Avoid direct confrontation." "That would be seen as weakness," Dr. Park countered. "The resistance movement would grow stronger. More species would join them." "And if we fight?" "If we fight," said Dr. Park slowly, "we prove their point. We become the violent aggressors they claim we are." President Oh was quiet for a long moment. Outside his window, the lights of Earth's cities twinkled like stars. Once, those lights had illuminated a world torn by constant warfare. Now they shone over a planet where conflicts were resolved through understanding rather than force. "There is a third option," the president said finally. Both of his advisors looked at him with questioning expressions. "We do what we've always done," President Oh explained. We try to understand them. 3 weeks later, the Purity fleet arrived. At Station Delta 7, 50 warships surrounded the small human outpost like predators circling wounded prey. The station's population of 300 beings seemed impossibly small against such overwhelming force. Commander Jinwoo Choi stood in the station's communications center, watching the fleet on his screens. Beside him stood General Kavanash, the former hegemony commander who now grew vegetables and taught children. Other former criminals had gathered as well, all of them choosing to stay and face whatever came next. "Incoming transmission," announced Lieutenant Bo-Ram Song. The main screen filled with the image of Fleet Admiral Korthak, leader of the Purity Fleet. He was a member of the warrior caste, a species bred for combat. His scarred face and multiple weapon implants made him look like death itself. "Human station," Korthak growled in a voice like grinding metal. "You have corrupted this sector long enough. Surrender your mind control devices and prepare to be cleansed." Commander Choi stepped forward calmly. "Admiral Korthak, welcome to our station. We have no weapons here and no devices of the kind you describe. Would you like to come aboard and see for yourself?" The Admiral's laugh was harsh and bitter. "Do you think me a fool? I know what you do to beings who visit your stations. You steal their warrior spirit and turn them into weak gardeners. No one is forced to stay here," Choi replied patiently. "Everyone chooses for themselves. Even now you could leave whenever you wish." Lies. Korthak slammed his fist against his command console. "Show me the weapons you use to break minds." Dr. Heejin Nam joined Commander Choi on the screen. Her small, gentle presence seemed to confuse the Admiral. "We use no weapons, Admiral," she said in a voice like flowing water. "Only conversation, only understanding, only the chance for beings to discover that there are choices beyond violence. You speak of choice while you infect this galaxy with your weakness." General Kavanash stepped into view. Admiral Korthak's expression changed to shock and then rage. "Kavanash, you were the greatest warrior of your generation. Look what they have done to you." The former hegemony general smiled sadly. "They showed me something I had never seen before, old friend. They showed me what it feels like to create instead of destroy, to build instead of tear down, to protect children by teaching them wisdom instead of training them to kill. You have been broken." "No," Kavanash replied. "I have been healed." For the next 6 hours, beings from Station Delta 7 spoke with members of the Purity Fleet. Former pirates told stories of finding purpose beyond raiding. Ex-slavers described the joy of teaching rather than capturing. Warriors shared their discoveries about protection through understanding rather than intimidation. Slowly, carefully, the humans did what they had always done. They listened to the fleet's fears and anger. They acknowledged the pain that drove the resistance to violence. They offered no judgment, no condemnation, only the chance to consider different possibilities. Some fleet members began asking questions. What would happen to warrior cultures if violence ended? How could proud species maintain their identity without conflict? What purpose would soldiers serve in a peaceful galaxy? The humans had answers. Warrior skills could protect the innocent, instead of conquering the weak. Proud cultures could compete in building and creating rather than destroying. Soldiers could become teachers who passed on strength and courage for positive purposes. As the hours passed, Admiral Korthak watched his fleet with growing alarm. Ship after ship requested permission to send delegations to the station. His own officers began questioning the mission. Some even suggested that perhaps the humans weren't the enemy they had believed. On the second day, 3 ships broke formation and docked with the station. On the third day, 12 more ships requested permission to send cultural exchange teams. By the end of the week, Admiral Korthak sat alone in his command ship with only 7 vessels still under his control. The rest of his fleet had either joined the Integration Alliance or declared themselves neutral observers. "You have destroyed everything," he screamed at Commander Choi during their final transmission. "We have changed everything," Choi corrected, gently. "Change is frightening, but it doesn't have to be destructive. My people will never accept this weakness." "Your people can choose for themselves," Dr. Nam added. "As you can choose for yourself. The offer remains open, Admiral, Come and see what we truly do here. Make your decision based on understanding rather than fear. Admiral Korthak cut the transmission and fled with his remaining ships to the outer rim. But even among his loyal crew, questions had been planted, seeds of doubt about whether violence was really the only way to live. 6 months later, President O received a message that made him smile for the first time in years. It came from a small agricultural colony on the edge of known space. The colony was run by former Resistance Coalition members who had decided to try humanity's integration methods with their own criminal population. The message was simple. It works. Send teachers. Dr. Park's latest report showed the numbers that told the real story. In sectors where integration protocols had been implemented, violent crime had dropped by 97%. Piracy was virtually extinct. Slavery had become so rare that each case made galactic news. Entire species that had been at war for centuries were now cooperating on joint scientific projects. The galaxy was becoming peaceful, one mind at a time. But perhaps the most significant change was happening on Earth itself. In the gardens outside President O's office, human children played with young beings from dozens of worlds. Former enemies who had become friends watched their offspring learn from each other.